Welcome to this Iiss Global Webinar. My name is Antoine Levesque. I'm a research fellow for South Asia at the Institute, based in and currently speaking from London. Since 2009, my work at the Institute has focused on nuclear issues in South Asia. I'm delighted that so many of you, particularly officials and experts, are able to join us today from not just the UK, but both the US East Coast and South Asia also. We meet today to discuss strategic instabilities in South Asia and Pakistan's nuclear policy. I'm delighted for this to introduce our speaker today, Colonel Imran Hassan. Colonel Imran is the 5th visiting research fellow for South Asia Strategic Affairs at the Iiss. He currently serves as the Deputy Director Research, Arms Control and Disarmament Affairs Branch at the Strategic Plans Division at the Government of Pakistan. Colonel Hassan joined the Iiss in March, just before the UK coronavirus lockdown. Like his 4 predecessors at the Iiss, the focus of his work with us is regional strategic and nuclear weapons related issues, one of the Iiss South Asia program's oldest strands of work. This public on-the-record webinar is intended to run like the ones we usually host in our office at Arundel House. Colonel Hassan will speak for up to 25 minutes, following which we will have a discussion for just over 30. I encourage you all to take part. To ask a question, feel free to use the chat function at the bottom of your Zoom window for written form, or put your virtual hand up to request to speak. I would like to take as many of your requests as possible in our discussion segment. Colonel Hassan, welcome. The floor is now yours for the next 20 to 25 minutes.
Thank you very much, Antoine, for a kind and generous introduction. It's been a great privilege to be at Iiss, a prestigious institute, and working as a visiting research fellow South Asia Strategic Affairs with Rahul Rai Chaudhary, our senior research fellow, and his remarkable team, albeit for a short time. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the entire spectrum of life. UK, unfortunately, is one of the regions that is adversely affected across the world. So let me first of all wish all of you and the Britain people to be safe and healthy under this hard and tense environment. I'm indeed thankful to all of you for taking your precious time out to attend this webinar. I hope you will find it useful with some valuable takeaways. It's my first public talk at Iiss, so I shall try to be as candid and forthright as possible. Nevertheless, whatever I reflect is based on my personal assessment and may not necessarily reflect government of Pakistan. And let me first of all highlight the salient aspects of Pakistan's nuclear policy before moving on to South Asian strategic instabilities. Ladies and gentlemen, I shall begin with a very profound and inspiring narration by founder of Pakistan, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, while he said that we do not cherish aggressive designs against any country or nation. We believe in the principle of honesty and fair play in national and international dealings and are prepared to make our utmost contribution to the promotion of peace and prosperity among nations of the world. These founding principles continue to guide Pakistan's foreign policy in a broader perspective and likewise remain at the heart of Pakistan's nuclear policy that rests on 4 broad strands as I view it. First, to preserve peace and stability in South Asia at lowest level of armament. Second, to pursue resolution of all disputes through negotiation and dialogues. Third, to have non-discriminatory access to peaceful nuclear technology for socio-economic development and cleaner environment. And fourth, to contribute as a responsible and mainstream partner in the global non-proliferation efforts. Pakistan continues to pursue these strands honestly at multilateral fora and bilateral dealings with all its partner states. On 28th May 2020, that makes the 22nd years of Pakistan over-nuclearization. Let me say that Pakistan was a reluctant entrant into the club of nuclear weapon states. India, in fact, conducted first nuclear test in 1974 by diverting nuclear material from peaceful nuclear program, which prompted the creation of nuclear supply groups in 1975 to prevent further misuse of peaceful nuclear trade. Going nuclear thus became a strategic compulsion for Pakistan. Eventually, Pakistan became an overt nuclear state when it responded to a series of nuclear tests by our neighbor in May 1998, thereby restoring strategic balance in the region. After becoming an overt nuclear weapon state, Pakistan has taken a number of institutional measures to ensure complete and effective oversight of its nuclear program. A robust command and control structure has been established, led by the National Command Authority, commonly known as NCA, which is the apex decision-making body chaired by the Prime Minister. The NCA represents a field of important civilian, military, and techno-scientific leadership. It exercises complete command and control over all aspects of Pakistan nuclear policy. The Strategic Plans Division, known as SPT, is the secretariat and the workhorse of the NCA. SPT ensures smooth and effective implementation of all the decisions by National Command Authority. Ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan's nuclear weapon capabilities are intended solely for Pakistan own defense against a specific existential threat to preserve peace and stability in South Asia. Restraint and responsibility remain the cordial principles upon which Pakistan policy of credible minimum deterrence is rested. Pakistan neither has the intent nor can afford to engage in conventional or nuclear arms. Pakistan doesn't seek parity with India, but a strategic balance that prevents space for war and creates conducive environment for socio-economic developments for our nation. Nevertheless, I would say that durable peace in the region would remain elusive if it does not envisage resolution of all outstanding disputes, in particular the issue of Kashmir, alongside nuclear and missile restraint, as well as conventional balance. These three interlocking elements are Pakistan's proposal of establishing a strategic restraint regime in South Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, strategic instabilities of South Asia have linkages with the contemporary global strategic environment. As the world gradually moves toward bipolarity, America's excedency over the global system has been affected by China's rise and Russia's resurgence. This phenomenon has triggered multiple dynamics. The US, still the world dominant power, has spread itself thin, and the power gap between it and its rival have gradually narrowed. Around the world, there is a sense that everything, including US hegemony, is in question. To me, 2020 can best be described as a year on the edge, a transition from the post-Cold War era to an era that is yet to be defined. A conjoint denominator of this puzzle is that the big power competition is sucking others into new confrontation. While many countries are still striving to get rid of the repercussions of superpower rivalry during the last century, the renewed competition for preeminence and global hegemony implicate the global strategic scenario. The fifth age of technological development is another imperative that makes common American, Russian, and Chinese choices to place arms control on the back burner. The arms control structure between US and Russia, as of today, appears to be deconstructed. The US withdrew from Intermediate Nuclear Force Treaty, extricated from Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, and the fate of New START and Open Skies hangs in balance. This supercore triad is jostling to gain a competitive strategic advantage over one another. Ladies and gentlemen, this interplay obviously affects South Asia. India has emerged as the major beneficiary of this competition, while playing on the both sides of the gallery. The US has opened all vistas of opportunities for it to develop enhanced and modern capabilities. It took a formal start from Indo-US nuclear deal in 2005, Indian exception to NSG in 2008, Defense Technology and Trade Initiative in 2012, Logistic Exchange Memorandum of Agreement in 2016, Communication Compatibility and Security Agreement in 2018, Industrial Security Annex in 2019, and the Basic Exchange and Cooperation Agreement that is lined up in 2020. to name a few in strategic domain. From Russia, acquisition of state-of-the-art S-400 missile defense system, stealthy with lots of firepower, Akula-class nuclear-powered attack submarines, and BrahMos, one of the fastest supersonic cruise missiles in the world, a few examples. BJP fascism is another factor that could prompt its leadership to increase hostility towards Pakistan and risk wage war. Citizen Amendment Act, abrogation of Article 370 and 35A of Indian Constitution is manifestation and widely reported by non-partisan international organizations across the world. Extremism is also reflected in its nuclear policies as the high-ranking government officials hint enunciation of no first use policy and threatened use of nuclear weapons sans provocation. Post-Pulwama crisis turned out to be the evidence. While an arms race is not advocated, certainly, strategic balance to maintain credible deterrent at minimum level of armaments is imperative for Pakistan's security calculus. Ladies and gentlemen, let me talk about the South Asian peculiar strategic environment before I move further. The South Asian context, the concept of strategic and deterrent stability should encompass both political and security dynamics, as well as doctrines and force postures for sustainable peace. A stable environment requires that steps should be taken at all tiers, including political and military, to avoid confrontation. Unique strategic cultures and distant political aspirations shape the strategic environment of the subcontinent. While Pakistan is trying to maintain a balance, India is attempting to revise the regional order. Its aggressive designs and blind eye towards conflict resolution is empirical evidence. Alongside, South Asia directly bears the fallout of big power competition. The shifting strategic realignment and global ambitions have led to the notion of counterweight and containment. Attempts to redefine geography, the so-called rebalancing, and the Indo-Pacific security construct are likely to create an imbalance in the subcontinent, detriment to peace and stability. Kashmir, however, remains the core issue of conflict between India and Pakistan has become a nuclear flashpoint. Unlike other freedom movements around the world, Kashmir is a UN-recognized movement for self-determination. The continued tyranny and oppression in Kashmir has assumed a humanitarian dimension due to aggravating human rights violation and atrocities on local to curb a legitimate freedom movement. One would wonder that Kashmir today is the most militarized zone of our planet. And now, since August last year, unfortunately has become the world's largest prison and concentration camp. Ladies and gentlemen, let me briefly talk about Indian strategic behavior before coming to Pakistan nuclear thinking. Regional growth and development in South Asia is hampered by a set of challenges. The historical animosity between India and Pakistan, their divergent political and strategic aspirations, and New Delhi's inclination to gather relative gains instead of cooperation shape South Asian security imperatives. India is engaged in unfettered armed development in a desire to build prestige. As per Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, commonly known as SIPRI, estimates of 2019, it has become the second largest armed importer of the world and accounts for 9.5% of the total global arms imports across the world. This is certainly detriment to strategic stability and peace of the region. At doctrinal level, it endeavors to espouse limited and hybrid warfare against Pakistan. Defensive doctrine, such as Cold Start, that seeks to explore space for subconventional and limited warfare under nuclear overhang, signifies its intent to carry out preemptive adventurism. The so-called surgical strikes and the idea of counterforce preemptive strikes are likely to lead towards conflict escalation. Attempts to exploit conventional advantage in a nuclearized environment directly implicate threatened stability and will have devastating effects. Likewise, implying subconventional prong to use state-sponsored terrorism as an instrument to undermine Pakistan's internal security and conduction of false flag operation to divert world attention from Kashmir and domestic issue is highly counterproductive. During February 2019 crisis, nuclear submarine was deployed to presumably tackle Pakistan. Such actions can quickly escalate the situation to get out of hands with disastrous outcome, not only for the region, but for the entire globe. A nuclear posture site, it has been taking global pulse about pros and cons to remove the shouts of its so-called policy of nuclear no first use. The recent technological and force posture development indicate that New Delhi is mulling over announcing a preemptive nuclear doctrine that relies on counterforce targeting. On the developmental side, there is a visible qualitative and quantitative military buildup, which has not only strained the deterrence equilibrium, but also run contrary to the New Delhi's claimed doctrinal posture of minimum credible deterrence. To date, it has developed 14 types of nuclear delivery systems and possesses the largest stock of unsafeguarded fissile material to build enough warhead of various shields to suit this change strategy. This weapon counts certainly far exceeds any reasonable requirements for maintaining a credible and minimalistic deterrence posture and NFU policies. Such numbers can only be acquired if a state is pursuing nuclear warfighting doctrines and comprehensive first strike to support preemption in expectation of damage mitigation. In the context of growing nuclear asymmetries in South Asia, Pakistan is expected to adhere to unilateral constraint with introduction of such destabilizing technologies and doctrine. I don't think any room is left for Pakistan for such a restraint. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to take the opportunity to highlight salient aspects of Pakistan nuclear thinking and how it contributes to stability in South Asia. Contrary to aggressive designs and postures, Pakistan nuclear policy is based on restraint and responsible pursuit of national security by adhering to the concept of credible minimum deterrence. In the absence of all factors, nuclear deterrence lies at the heart of strategic stability in South Asia. Islamabad neither wants nor is engaged in boundaries, but upkeep of regional stability within the bound of minimalism is obviously essential. Pakistan has been open to arms control measures, which includes building confidence and introducing a strategic restraint regime. Lack of reciprocity has only aggravated regional instabilities. Policies based on discrimination and exceptionalism for vested interests and economic gains are fueling instability at the cost of undermining regional balance. Exceptionalism facilitated certain states to import huge quantity of uranium while allowing keeping its reactor outside International Atomic Energy Agency, that is IAEA, safeguards, consequently freeing all domestic uranium to make plutonium for developing nuclear weapons. As a responsible nuclear power, Pakistan does not believe in banishing nuclear arsenals or coercing its neighbors. It maintains modest force posture and rationality in its nuclear doctrine to credibly battle one adversary that constantly keep expanding the spectrum of threat. Pakistan desires regional peace, stability, and security, while remaining strongly committed to international non-proliferation norm and best practices. Ladies and gentlemen, while concluding, I would say that conflict resolution, strategic stability, and arms control are prerequisites for durable peace. These three interlocking elements reduce the risk of war by eliminating hostilities among states while ensuring a stable environment. The US-Russo strategic stability paradigm has avoided a major war since 1945. We know that. An order has been built around it, and it had a big following. This recipe for peace held both superpowers from contemplating offensive doctrines and encouraging them to develop institutionalized measures to pursue arms control. I believe there is a need to capitalize on these already agreed upon global norms to facilitate mutual coexistence. In these troubled times, cooperation instead of containment should be our way forward. That should be the best way forward. While zero-sum games only entrap us in an unending competition, win-win cooperation promises widely shared benefits and incentives. South Asia is the most populous and one of the most resource-rich regions of the world, but also one of the least developed. The future lies in the hand of human resource, and only through a peaceful environment can we unleash this priceless resource to fully utilize its due potential. I will end here. I thank you all for patient hearing, and I shall be very pleased to answer to your question if you have any. Over to Anton.
Colonel Hassan, thank you very much. We now have just under 40 minutes for our discussion, so this is really excellent. I do encourage all of you to take part. As I say, do register your interest in writing or request to take the floor with the raise your hand feature, and I do have a few requests already. My two points to you all are as follows. Please first tell us who you are if you take the floor by speech, and second, do please ask a brief question, minimizing any comment. Let me finally remind you all that this meeting is held entirely on the record. The floor is open for your questions. As you gather your thoughts, let me perhaps ask you, Colonel Hassan, the first one of those. You talked a lot about instability. Could you tell us what, in a nutshell, is the topmost factor contributing, in your view, to strategic instability in South Asia, and really, most importantly, what can be done about it?
Yeah, thank you, Anton. Thank you, Anton, for asking this question. I think the most important strategic instability factor in South Asia between India and Pakistan is the unresolved issue of Kashmir. And certainly it needs a resolution as per the wishes of people and as per the UN Security Council resolutions. But certainly India has a different perspective to it. And they say that as per Indian perspective, they say it's a bilateral issue. And when they say it's a bilateral issue, they don't talk to Pakistan. They're not willing to come on the table, unfortunately. And when you talk about UN Security Council resolutions and mediation, they say it's a bilateral issue. So it's a complex situation. But let me get into it a bit because it's a fundamental issue. As of today, India blames Pakistan for supporting insurgents in Kashmir and calls it as a state sponsor of terrorism, whereas Pakistan views it as a legitimate freedom struggle by natives for the right of self-determination. Pakistan conversely accuses India for waging terrorism inside its territory and supporting Balochistan Liberation Army and Tehreek-e-Taliban in Pakistan. So what are the realities is the basic single big question. Let me put across latest Indo-Pak crisis of February 2019 as a very brief case study. As reported by New York Times in February 2019, Lieutenant General D.S. Huda, an Indian Army commander, said after the Pulwama incident that it is not possible to bring such massive amount of explosive used by Pulwama suicide bomber by infiltrating across the border. I appreciate General Huda, who was very straight enough to add that the material might have been taken from the stashes of explosive being used to blast the mountainside to brighten the highway to Jammu. This is the same highway where the incident took place. The Reuters reported in February 2019 that the Pulwama bomber, Adil Ahmed Tar, was in fact the resident of Pulwama in Indian Kashmir. According to his parents, he was radicalized after being tortured by Indian security forces. I think it's a time that India needs to look inward than to blame Pakistan for everything bad that happens in India and Kashmir. Pakistan does not see, as I view it, to use terrorism as a matter of policy against any state. But I wonder the arrest of serving Indian naval officer Gulbhushan Yadav from Pakistan, who confessed on record that he had a mission to sabotage China-Pakistan Islamic corridor. The former US Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel said on record that India is using Afghanistan as a second front against Pakistan. I leave these things to your judgment, but what I believe is that the Pakistan itself has been a victim of terrorism. It suffered more than 65,000 human lives and over 126 billion losses to the economy, to national exchequer. These things are on record. Pakistan's sacrifices on war and terror are widely acknowledged and appreciated by international community. And let me take this opportunity while I talk about Kashmir to highlight human rights violation in Kashmir, reported by various non-partisan international organizations. 43 pages report by the Office of UN High Commission for Human Rights, released in July 2019, raises serious concern about abuses by state security forces in Indian High Kashmir. The Genocide Watch issued a genocide alert in August 2019 and called upon the United Nations, the member state, to warn India not to commit genocide in Kashmir. The UN Secretary General stated in February 2020 that he was personally concerned about the future of religious minorities in India. He said that the reports brought out by various human rights bodies in Kashmir show the reality and needs to be taken seriously. I believe it's high time that the UN Security Council should take into account the human rights violation scenario in Kashmir. And let me also add that in April 2020, I was just going through last month's report, that the Asian Forum for Human Rights and Development and the International Federation for Human Rights said in a joint statement that intimidation and criminalization of journalists and human rights defenders in India administered Jammu and Kashmir constitute a matter of great concern and must end. So these are the realities on the ground. It is now up to international community and UN Security Council to remain as a silent observer or to act wisely, helping both the countries to resolve this issue and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me now take a couple of questions. They are coming in quite thick and fast from our audience. First, from Professor Iftikhar Malik in the UK. And this is a question about peacemaking. Pakistan has weathered to a great extent some harrowing challenges since 2001, both of a regional and internal types. Shouldn't it now undertake a substantive initiative for peace vis-à-vis India, including an offer for a no-war pact? That is the first question. I would like to also bundle in a couple of other points which were asked of me around the role you think the governing party in India, the BJP, may have or may not have, depending on your views, in creating or sustaining instability in the region.
Thank you, Indine. Thank you, Indine. I'd like to take on your second question first, and then come on to your first question. I think it's again a very important question. The BJP fascism, is it a factor of strategic instability? To me, BJP fascism could be a major factor of instability, provoking risk of war. It however looks a paradox that the BJP leadership denies subjugating minorities and Muslims in India. So one wonders what could be the reality actually. I was just going through recently a report by New York Times in which they sent a team of reporters to India to find out the facts on the ground to discount. The team says that we found out a story altogether different to what BJP leadership conventionally claims. According to that report of New York Times, the BJP has pulled the country away from its foundation as a secular and multicultural nation and turned India into a more overtly Hindu state. The report further says that the India global ambition as the world's largest democracy are strained at its government take an illiberal act to Hindu nationalism. The Citizen Amendment Act and abrogation of Article 370 and 35A of Indian Constitution is reflection. The report says, whereas Hindu, Jains, Buddhists, and Sikhs from the other neighboring countries have a right to come and join India as a citizen, over 2 million Muslims in Assam have become aliens overnight. The Muslims in India, unfortunately, have become foreigners. Over 8 million Muslims in Kashmir are under siege since abrogation of Article 370 and 35A in August 2019. People across the world have condemned it. But let me tell you that there are now growing vices within the India as well. Arundhati Roy, a famous Indian political and human rights activist, said, the crisis of hatred against Muslims continues in India. The people who gathered to protest against Citizen Amendment Act were massacred in Delhi under the cover of COVID-19. Hindu Nationalist Party is leaving no opportunity against Muslims. the fascist regime ideology is based on cleansing of Indian Muslims, similar to what happened with Jews in Nazi Germany. So that's what Arundhati Roy is saying. It's also interesting to know that on April 28, 2020, just last month, one of the leading global voices on religious freedom, the US Commission on International Religious Freedom, in its annual report called upon the State Department to add India on its list of countries with uniquely poor record on protecting freedom of worship. The report says that the Citizen Amendment Act passed in the majority Hindu Indian parliament violates fundamental religious rights, especially for Indian Muslims. The report further says that the PM Modi has championed a radical brand of Hindu nationalism, turned Hindutva, and overseen a dramatic rise in religiously motivated violence across India. His political philosophy views faith other than Hinduism as foreign and their adherent as second-class citizens. The report fortunately has come up from a non-partisan organization. It is available, you can access it online, when religious persecution of Muslims in India is at peak. But I believe merely publishing a report may be the first step until international community cares of stopping India doing these persecutions. To me, by no means, all this could be digestible in today's modern world, and humanity needs to wake up on that account. So coming on to your second question, that is arms control proposal in South Asia. I think, again, I would say this is very important.
And a no-war pact.
There has to be an arms control between India and Pakistan, and there is no denial to this fact, because arms control definitely it contributes to broadly strategic stability. As I've said in my script, that it's arms control, it is nuclear deterrence, it's conflict resolution. These three fund elements put together, they bring strategic stabilities. But you need a partner for arms control. The Pakistan has proposed all possible arms control and confidence building measures to India, but you can't move ahead single-handedly. You can't clap with one hand. Let me go through in a bit detail for your consumption that what Pakistan has done to India. Giant declaration of non-acquisition of manufacturing of nuclear weapons was proposed to India in 1978. The nuclear weapon free zone in South Asia, as you are saying, that was proposed to India back in 1978. Reciprocal inspections of Iiss nuclear facilities, that was proposed in 1979. Signing NPT, less few people know that. Simultaneously, it was proposed by Pakistan to India in 1978. Accept full scope IAEA safeguards in 1979. Agree to bilateral treaty banning nuclear tests in 1987. South Asia Zero Missile Zone in 1994. Strategic restraint regime after becoming overt nuclearization in 1998. And the strategic restraint regime still lies on table, proposed by Pakistan. An expanded version was handed over to India in 2001, and the non-paper was given to India in 2004. And let me tell you what it contains, the strategic restraint regime. It has a complete manual for itself. It talks about conflict resolution through sustained and result-oriented dialogues. It talks about measures for nuclear restraint, conventional balance at a political and expert level. What would be the objective of minimum credible deterrence? It doesn't say that you say we have a policy of minimum credible deterrence. You bring it in practice, you bring it in actions, only then it's useful. No operational deployment of nuclear capable ballistic and delivery missiles. No acquisition or deployment of ABMs, awareness of nuclear, missile, and conventional arms, and continuation of nuclear test moratoria and bilateral moratoria that was proposed to India in 2016. So Pakistan has put forth all-encompassing strategic restraint regime that holds significant potential to strengthen strategic stability and possesses all the necessary ingredients that may be required to reduce the risk of conflict escalation and arms race in South Asia. But obviously, it depends on India, willingness and interest, how they take it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to now take a question from India. Dr. Manpreet Sethi, I think you raised your hand. Would you like to come in, please?
Yeah. Can you hear me, Antoine?
Yes, absolutely. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And Colonel Hassan, it was very nice listening to your views. I think the purpose of such dialogue is to promote better understanding about each other's perspective, and I appreciate the perspective that you've given from your understanding. IISS, I'm very grateful to them for giving me a similar opportunity of speaking on a almost similar subject of strategic instability, and I called it not South Asia but Southern Asia, sometime in February this year. Now, I listened to your perspective on Indian strategic behavior, and as you would expect, I have a very different view of that. But just a couple of points. Firstly, to put your mind to rest on the issue of no first use. In any case, Pakistan doesn't believe India's no first use, but let me just assure you that India has no desire of giving up no first use, because we understand the benefits that you get from no first use and the problems that you get into with first use, and we are seeing Pakistan struggling with some of those issues. Secondly, on the issue of unsafeguarded material, India has a very large nuclear power program, sir, as you know, and the unsafeguarded material that you're referring to is also part of our nuclear power program. We've been hearing about this unsafeguarded material for such a long period of time. If India wanted, we could have increased the arsenal. But given that the understanding of India's nuclear doctrine is premised on deterrence by punishment, there is no reason for India to increase its arsenal beyond what is necessary to cause unacceptable damage. And with nuclear weapons, which are weapons of mass destruction, it's very easy to cause unacceptable damage. So please don't be worried about any kind of a nuclear number racing that India would get into. Thirdly, your concern about BJP having taken away secular credentials of India. Again, India has a constitution which is rock solid. We've got a population of Muslims which is more than what Pakistan has, and all of them have a say in the making of what India is. So therefore, with the kind of democratic principles that India has positioned its political system on, I don't think that should be a matter of concern. Things happen and things change also in the country. I have just two brief questions for you, sir. You said Pakistan does not believe in the use of terrorism against any state. I wonder then why it remains on the grey list of the Financial Action Task Force. Why hasn't it been able to extricate itself from there? My second point is, as I mentioned to you, I spoke on Southern Asia. I don't think South Asia makes for a nuclear construct because of the presence of China, a word that you did not mention during your presentation. You've spoken about the benefits of the strategic restraint regime. And my question, and you say that it has all the necessary ingredients for confidence building and arms control. Can you offer any suggestions of strategic stability that take into account India's concerns with China? Can your strategic restraint regime take into account these concerns and put in some constructive suggestions on how strategic stability can be built, including India, Pakistan, and China? Thank you very much, and I quite enjoyed it.
Dr. Sethi, thank you very much. Colonel Hassan, before you answer, could I double down on the China point, particularly simply because a lot of our colleagues tuning in have been asking a similar question. What about the China factor, looking particularly at the circumstances of the ongoing developments on the line of actual control between India and China? But also more widely, China's role in the Indian Ocean region. So over to you.
Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you. The ladies asked not many questions. Let me get on to first what the lady has asked about NFU, and then I'll get on to your question about China. The India NFU pledge and the policy of credible minimum deterrence is contested on a rational that over a period of time, high-ranking government officials have indicated otherwise. The huge military spending, over 70 billion in 2019 only, as per CIPRI estimate 2020, by no means support minimalism. Let me highlight only a few cases, otherwise the list is too long and the time would just pass away. The Business Standard reported statement of Indian Defence Minister Rajnath Singh on 16th August 2019 that India follows no first use policy regarding lethal weapons, but what happens in future will depend on circumstances. Shiv Shankar Menon, the former Foreign Secretary and National Security Advisor in his book, Choices Inside Making of Indian Foreign Policy, published in November 2016, candidly says, and I appreciate him, he says if Pakistan were to use tactical nuclear weapons, it would effectively free India to undertake a comprehensive first strike against Pakistan. And I found out when I read the book of Mammon, I found it very unique, as he was innovatively interpreted preemption as consistent with the Indian current NFU declaration. He later declared that the Indian nuclear doctrine has far greater flexibility than it gets credit for. The Lieutenant General retired B.S. Nagal, former Indian Strategic Force Commander and advisor to PM Office on nuclear issues, who can tell better than him, in his recent book, Military Strategy for India in 21st Century, advocates that India should explicitly abandon NFU in favor of doctrine of ambiguity, which encompasses potential first uses in preemption scenarios. Furthermore, BJP Manifesto 2014 that explicitly highlights that there is a need to review Indian NFU policy. You can access the document, it is available still online. So all these developments neither support NFU to be credible, nor support minimalism. So this is on account of NFU. And let me go on to the question of China. This is again very fundamental question. And thanks, in fact, for asking this question, because this is an assertion that India normally treats as a justification to its open-ended military buildup and a huge defense expenditure, more than 70 billions last year. While I agree that there is a history of India having border issues with China, but if you see it, the environment holistically, to my understanding, the realities could be different in a magnitude as usually contemplated by India. All three strike codes of Indian Army are Pakistan specific. Their composition, disposition support the argument. 1 corps part of Southern Command disposed at Jaipur, 2 corps part of Western Command at Chandigarh, and 21 corps part of Southern Command at Pune. So if you just Google it and see it on a map, it leaves no doubt that all of these three striking formations are Pakistan-based, not China. Likewise, more than 70% of Indian Air Force's assets are disposed and located Pakistan-specific. In regard to Indian Navy, Sagarika, that is K-15 submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and Dhanush, that is ship-launched ballistic missile, with ranges of 750 and 350 respectively, one cannot use these weapons system against China either from the Arabian Sea or Bay of Bengal. Even recently test-fired K-4 submarine-launched ballistic missile has featured involving both short ranges and altered trajectories that appear more applicable to Pakistan than to China. Similarly, all these three versions of the short-range ballistic missiles, that is Prithvi 1, 2, 3, you have a Prahar, you have Agni 1, Agni 2, BrahMos, Nirbhay, are Pakistan-specific due to limited ranges and have virtually no utility against China. So these are the realities on ground as I perceive it. But let me also add that the recent history reflects that India, by and large, maintains reasonable relations with China. Less border disputes, as Antoine mentioned recently. Those are certainly not akin to the issue as Jammu and Kashmir between India and Pakistan. The China-India bilateral trade volume in 2019 was over 92 billion. The leadership of both countries frequently interacts, and the defense and security dialogues at defense security level continues. So everything that India portrays, I will, with due respect, I would tend to disagree. But let me also highlight that the way all the neighbors around India face problems with its behavior, it's not only, that's a matter of concern. It's not only Pakistan and China. The Wired reported day before yesterday, I was just going through that India is the fast losing its friends and its neighbors. This time, the trouble stems from the Modi government. That Wired says the most recent gift to Hindu pilgrimage, a road which was built to reach Kailash Manasarovar in Tibet. The Nepalese government has strongly rejected Indian claims over those territories. So these are the things, and due to Citizen Amendment Act, India is having a problem with Bangladesh. So India, that claims to be the world's largest democracy, unfortunately is affecting dangerously intolerable under BJP regime. And I think that's my perspective, and that's how I take it, and that's how the international bodies across the world are taking it.
Colonel Hassan, thank you. You've addressed the India part of this equation, but I'm also getting some questions related to China and about your views or the views of Pakistan of China. My colleague Desmond Bowen, for example, is asking, looking at the sum of China's actions in the Indo-Pacific generally, and in consideration of Pakistan's relations with China, is China an entirely benign presence in the region, for example? And I think this echoes the point which Dr. Sethi also made. Would you like to address that?
Thank you, Antoine, for asking this question, putting across this question. As I referred during my talk, that India has become a major beneficiary of great power competition while playing both sides of the gallery. The US and its allies have opened vistas of opportunities for it to develop and acquire modern technologies. Its engagement with Russia likewise continues, being old Cold War strategic partners. I wonder why Pakistan-China cooperation should be so irritating. I found no reason to it. China is the fastest growing economy of the world and has strategic partnership with many other nations around the world. The latest, just few days back, I was just going through a report in which UK government is also considering civil nuclear cooperation with China to meet its growing energy demands. The Pakistan-China friendship is all-weather and enjoys a rich history. It is based on commonality of interest and development of the region. It bears socio-economic benefits, and that's how Pakistan, and that's how I look at it. It's a sign of positivity.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. I have a question from a UK IISS member, Mr. Nicholas McLean. Does the government of Pakistan see value in a hotline between the Indian and Pakistani prime ministers in order to avoid nuclear miscalculation? And this arcs back to some of the post-mortem assessments of last year's Pulwama Balakot situation, and really the concern over the circumstances which led to both escalation and de-escalation in that particular context. There are other questions coming in related to that particular crisis. So I wonder if you could address very briefly your sense of perhaps what Pakistan's stance and lessons might be from that crisis, and that specific question about a hotline and whatever other measures could be put forward to practically reduce risk of escalation.
Thank you, Antoine. First to your first question about hotline. No denial to it, totally agreed. If it is done, why not? There's already a hotline between DGMOs. There was a proposal of hotline between foreign secretaries. It could not be materialized. So I'm totally supportive to that. The second question, I think that's again a very fundamental question, that how, what was the behavior of India or Pakistan in post-Pulwama crisis? I think being a nuclear weapon possessor states, one need to act more wisely and responsibly than ever before. The February 2019 incident reflects that had it not been to the restraint and responsible behavior on the part of India, things might have gone out of control. The Indian fortunately did not behave responsibly by taking a risk to breach international boundaries. And taking down of Indian jet by PF and the arrest of Indian pilot by Pakistan Army, the Prime Minister Modi threatened use of mother of all bombs and said it will be a night of massacre if arrested Indian pilot is not returned back. One wonders that Indian Prime Minister, a country having nuclear weapons, is threatening to use nuclear weapons so irresponsibly. As per the Indian Navy, they said that the frontline assets, the nuclear ballistic missile submarine, Arihant, was used to patrolling, presumably, to attack Pakistan, carrying ready-to-fire ballistic missile, K-14 or K-15. One wonders who commanded such a mission. No one heard that the Indian Nuclear Command Authority was ever convened during the crisis. Let me also highlight that India is developing a suite of nuclear capabilities at a high official making increasing statements about preemptions and counterforce style. That is certainly inconsistent with its profit strategy of minimum credible deterrence. But if someone wants to get into the details, certainly I don't have a time to get in. One can read, it's a very profound article by Vipin Narang and Christopher Clary that's published in International Security, I think fall 2019. It's worth reading. I read it a few days back and I really enjoyed it. So if one is interested, you can go through. It will give you a very detailed version what I'm saying with evidence and logic. So I believe that this is a time to be responsible and remember the cordial lessons that there are no winners in nuclear war. Who else would know better than Bertrand Brody, a very renowned American strategist, who said, with the advent of nuclear weapons, now chief purpose of our strategy is to avoid war. Before, it was to win a war. I believe there's a need to take into account these cordial principles of the leading scholars and statistics than to draw very wrong conclusions by Pulwama crisis. So that's my take on that.
Thank you. We have 8 minutes to the end of our meeting. I'd like to try and take 2 rounds of questions. So first, I'd like to call on Mr. Said Ali Zia Zafri, based in the United States, I believe. And secondly, on Colonel Asif and the Pakistan High Commission here in London. So over to Mr. Said Ali Zia Zafri. Please ask a question. Do we have Mr. Zafri? Okay, Mr. Colonel Imran then, Mr. Imran Rana Khan. Can my colleague in IT help me here? Mr. Rana Khan, would you like to come in? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Anton. I believe you can hear me now.
We can, yes. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for providing this opportunity to hear from Colonel Imran. Although my first question, which I wrote it down also partially have been addressed. The certain part was, Colonel Imran, do you think that the present race of weapon import in India is specifically to China and Pakistan should not be worried? That is the first question. Secondly, a small comment. I had the opportunity to listen to Dr. Manpreet Sethi here in February. And today she brought out the point for the no first use again. And I asked the last time the same question. Once we hear out so many voices that to be from very high officials regarding the use of weapons, then the policy of no first use may not sound very authentic in that way. So Colonel Imran, your take on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before we come to this, I'd like to ask a second question in this batch. I have a question for my colleague Ben Barry at the IISS. Both India and Pakistan are deploying nuclear weapons to sea. Does this not reduce strategic stability, and what could be done to restore stability in this domain? Over to you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Antoine, for putting us these questions. First of all, in response to Colonel Donna, certainly the arms race and the huge quantity of artillery that's being imported by India, certainly I do agree with you. It's strained the strategic stability and it's counterproductive and it should not be there. There has to be a limit to it. But as I've already said in detail, that you cannot clap with one hand, you have to sit together and you have to carry out comprehensive dialogues, only then you can find a way to it. Your pledge of your question about NFU, I have given you my perspective in detail. I have told that if you track since last about 2 decades, since India and Pakistan became over-nuclearized nuclear weapon states, if you track down the events, if you get into the research, you will come to know that NFU pledge is not credible. I have already spoken on that. You can just see that. Now, coming on to the third question, that is nuclearization of Indian Ocean. I think this is again a very, very important question. And I think it's a matter of great concern, not only for Indian Ocean littoral states, but should be a matter of concern for international community as a whole. The Pakistan has not, to my perspective, Pakistan has not initiated to nuclearize the Indian Ocean. India has taken a step. The the introduction of nuclear weapons at sea by India has a potential to upset the fragile balance of Indian ocean security. India has gone beyond its ambition to create a minimum credible deterrent. Pakistan will be compelled to reassess its nuclear capabilities. There is an obvious dichotomy in India's declaratory nuclear force posture vis-a-vis development and employment ambitions. Let me get into bit details on this issue owing to its potential risks. According to Indian government sources, the Indian first ballistic missile nuclear submarine, commonly known as SSBM, carried out nuclear deterrent patrol in November 2018. The INS Arihant carried 12 Sagarika K-15 submarine launched ballistic missiles with a range of 750 kilometers, as well as the versions of nuclear capable Nirbhik cruise missile. The post-Pulwama crisis, the SSBM again employed a deterrent patrol carrying ready-to-fire nuclear weapons to deter Pakistan. Notably, the officials' Indian policy is to keep nuclear warheads dematted from actual missiles. It raises alarms, certainly, I agree with you, it raises alarms over the safety and security of Indian nuclear arsenals because a sea-based doctrine may entail a ready-to-use arsenal and less restricted command and control procedures, increasing possibility of accidental use. In November 2017, India launched the second nuclear submarine of 4 planned Arihant class nuclear submarines, the INS Arihant, that is expected to be commissioned during this year. Additionally, the Indian Navy has also begun construction of remaining 2 Arihant submarine, that is S3 and S4. You can just Google it, carry out research, these things are available, which I'm telling you. So these 4 SSBNs put together will have capability to carry around 100 ready-to-fire submarine-launched ballistic missiles, making Indian Ocean a dangerous proposition. Pakistan is certainly not doing it. Pakistan is not doing it. Pakistan has carried out the Babur 3 missile test, that is submarine-launched cruise missile with a range of 450, and Pakistan was compelled to do it. You have to make a capability to bring strategic stability. It doesn't mean your adversary is expanding the entire spectrum of threat and you're just quiet, you're not doing anything. As I said, the Pakistan is forced to take measures with a minimalistic approach. And let me also highlight that in March 2019, India and Russia signed a deal for the lease of another Akula class nuclear submarine that's called SSM to India for another 10 years. The new vessel called the Chakra 3 will be delivered to Indian Navy by 2025. So it will be the 3rd Russian nuclear attack submarine to be leased to Indian Navy. So these developments certainly adds instability. One has to look at it. That's my perspective on it.
Colonel Hassan, thank you. We are up against the time. I'd like to just call on one last phone-in intervention from Pakistan, and this is Dr. Saima Sial. Could you please ask a question and be very brief so we devote another extra minute or so to your point?
Thank you so much, Anton, for this opportunity.
Welcome.
And thank you so much. I'm really delighted to be sitting through this discussion. My very brief comment on the preemptive counterforce that we've been talking about is this.
Ever so briefly, if you could, please, and please ask a question.
Okay. Yeah, but just this very brief point is that it's not just because the question emanates out of this, if you'd kindly allow me to ask it, is that if it were just about the statements, then the threat would not be there. Considering that deterrence is about the perception of how you view your adversary's capabilities, it is the development of the strategic offensive technologies that are happening inside India, the BMD, the hypersonic, early deployment of in a short second strike platform in a crisis early, that sort of accentuates it. And so my question is to Sir Imran, and I thought that was a very good presentation, but at one point, and you just referred to it now as well, you said that India is constantly expanding the spectrum of threat. Now, considering that the traditional notion of strategic stability also entails deterrence and crisis stability, and a part of your topic talks about the options that Pakistan has or the effect that it has on Pakistan's nuclear policy. How do you see that what actions can Pakistan take in the absence of any arms control framework currently, and also in the absence of the willingness for a dialogue with India? I'd like to draw your attention to the limited war doctrine of 2018 that talks about India fighting the full spectrum of conflict, and that too in a true front war scenario. So I wanted to draw your attention to that. Thank you.
Let's see, Al, thank you very much. And Colonel Hassan, can I ask you to try and synthesize your answer in about a minute? We're up against time now. It's very difficult, but over to you.
Thank you, Dwayne, and thank you for asking this important question. I agree with the lady when she says that there's no willingness of arms control. So what to do? What are the options with Pakistan? Very comprehensively, very briefly, and very honestly, if I were to put across, I think Pakistan has to build on nuclear deterrence. That's the only way. That's the only way. If you read the literature since last about the 60, 70 years till the time from the nuclear weapon advantage. So you have to build the nuclear deterrence. That's the only way that stops your adversary from taking undesired action. The war, the nuclear war, of course, it does not benefit anyone. As I've already said, there are no winners in nuclear war. So Pakistan has to take actions to build the nuclear deterrence. We have to foment it. That's the only way we can live in peace. Thank you, John.
Colonel, thank you. I'm afraid we're really out of time now. My most sincere apologies to the more than 10 questions I was not able to address and put to our speaker. I'd like to thank you all for taking part and really making this a rich policy relevant two-way discussion. I hope you will all join me in warmly thanking our speaker, Colonel Hassan from Pakistan, for his insight today. Stay tuned for our next IISS South Asia program webinar, and do check our IISS YouTube channel in the coming days for the recording of this event. Until then, thank you, keep safe, and goodbye. Bye.
Thank you, Antoine. Pleasure being with you. Thank you.